Hello and welcome to this week's episode of RightCast Radio. I am your host. They call me the Jackrabbit. With me as always is the founder of RightChan.org.
Traditionalist.
And our two panelists.
Copypot.
And Cobra.
And today we're going to be a little bit lighthearted since we've had some pretty heavy conversations for the past couple of weeks. We decided to lighten it up a little bit and we were going to discuss what would it look like to create an off-grid community or a town. So let's get started with that.
So are we talking about like a township here, or
Township, tribe, kindred, whatever you want to call it.
I think the way at least I think of it as kind of a city-state, something that can be self-sufficient and survive without the rest of the outside world if necessary.
A state within a state, as it were.
Essentially.
Yeah.
all right? Yeah, because I know there's a place. I forgot the name of it, and I forgot where it was. But I know there's a place. But they pay taxes, but they still have their own.
Are you referring to the Wolves of Vinland?
No, they're within the U.S. I know that. I think.
Yes, that they are. The Wolves are within the U.S. It's a cult, but they're within
No,
the U.S.
I'm not talking about a cult. It's an actual.
I was being slightly facetious there. The Wolves of Vinland are a group that they're a group of. I guess the best way to describe it would be bikers. Like they're like.
I think you had it right the first time. They really are kind of a cult.
Yeah, it's more of a. They were a group of guys that rode motorcycles together.
Is it? It wouldn't be the same guy that does Viking preparedness, is it?
Possibly, yeah.
It's
he does.
What's his name?
Operation. It's Paul Wagner and Robert
Yeah.
Wagner, the two brothers that run it. They run Operation Werewolf, which is their outreach program and their. I guess you would call it their.
Party foul.
Yeah, I know. Bleh.
you need to turn these things off.
Yeah, we'll turn. Sorry, folks. We're going ahead and.
No, you're not.
These guys.
These guys, I know it.
Take this out in post-production.
Yeah. So we have, if that's who you're talking about, they're a group of guys that were almost biker gang-esque. Like, they're not a biker gang, but they're very...
They have that aesthetic.
Yeah, they have that aesthetic, like leather and patches, and they patch people in.
Maybe not, because this guy's more, I think this is more, what I'm talking about is actually a Christian guy.
Okay, this is definitely not them, because
Yeah,
the Wolves of Vinland, they aren't even really proper heathens. I got nothing against the Wolves, but they aren't. They kind of pick and choose what they like from heathenry, and they kind of put their own spin on it, and it works for them, so whatever. So, but that's where I say it's a cult. Because,
so they're the Mormons of heathenry?
You know?
Hello, sir. Would you like us to talk to you for a moment about Odin?
You have a moment to talk about our Lord Talos.
Yeah, what would you like to know?
But
so what are we going at here? Are we talking about just the social structure? How would it be self-sufficient, or kind of all the above? Let's start with the social structure. How would that work out?
Well, it depends on what kind of group you're looking for. So you can either have a group based on an idea, or you can have a group based on a uniting thing, whether that uniting thing is race, religion, culture, what have you.
Yeah.
So if you were to, say, have a kindred, like a heathen kindred, Wolves of Vinland aside, like a traditional heathen kindred, what you would typically have is you would have a chieftain, and then you would have a gothi. Yeah. And those two would be working together. A chieftain is the guy that handles the day-to-day runnings of this tribe, and a gothi is the religious leader. A gothi is to heathenry as a priest is to Catholicism. It's not quite that.
Yeah,
but it's the closest
weird,
thing.
and it depends on whether or not you're talking about historical heathenism or modern heathenism. Because it is
referring to modern
slightly different.
I'm referring to modern heathenry because heathenry is in its own, by its very nature, was created for people. It was created to be used in whatever area and whatever way you were living at the time. Like, it's one of those things, unlike, and I'm not talking down about Christianity at all, but unlike Christianity, which has a very strict set of, this is how you do things, this is how you do, and like Catholicism, this is how you do Mass, this is how you do, heathenry isn't quite that lockstep. It tends to be more what works for you. So when you look at stuff like the Poetic Eddas and stuff like that, you'll get into it and you look into stuff and like, well, they didn't have cars and planes and guns back then than they do now. So what do you take? And it's a give and take.
What can you take and leave?
Right. So for modern terms, you would generally have something like a gothi who would be the religious leader, and he would be the one that's he kind of acts as like the he does the bloats and the stumbles and all the festivals, and then he also does the I'm having trouble with my wife. We need to talk.
Yeah.
We need to bring in and like do counseling.
So he would be
marriages, deaths.
He would be not
births.
just would he just be a religious leader, or would he also be the community leader?
The idea there, I think, would be the Gothi comes in and says, "Hey, it'd be really cool if we had a feast. We've had people we haven't been talking recently. We need to have a feast." And then the chieftain says, "Okay, cool. I'm gonna buy the tables, and the pig, and we're gonna slaughter it." And that's where those two marry in like that. So the Gothi's the one that's like, "Hey, I'm going to get the ball rolling," and then the chieftain says, "Here's the physical things we need, and I will set it up."
Yeah.
Ideally, you would have, and what would happen in a kindred or tribe like that is you would have a group of people that were, they'd be living in this small area, and they'd be working in this other stuff, and the Gothi and the chieftain would be working together with each other to make sure that everything ran smoothly.
So it's kind of a dual leadership thing there.
Right. It wouldn't be a struggle for power. It would be
it'd be like a husband and a wife per se. Over
that's a good way to look at it. Yeah.
Yeah, another run this by because not only could you do it from a religious standpoint like that, but also it could also be done from a more of a political standpoint, maybe, or more of a having a leader. Mm-hmm. I think Chadas gave us a diagram that was kind of showing us different branches of a certain government style.
Right.
Like actually have a leader that was elected for a certain term, and then have little branches off of that. That would also be an interesting way to go about doing things. But with any kind of government system, I would one of two things would need to happen. Mm-hmm. Either number one, you would need to very, very carefully choose your leader make sure that leader had a religious devotion to his people and to his tribe. Mm-hmm. And number two, you would have to have a check and a balance with that. So if he ever went crazy, you could oust him, or you could have terms.
I actually propose a system that's actually essentially all three.
Okay.
So the way I would handle that, rather than electing leaders, they would be picked through meritocracy.
Okay.
So you'd have a council, which would be comprised of respected members of the community and the heads of various, like a laborers guild, an artisans guild, things like that. Mm-hmm. And the guild members who were on the council would be the best craftsmen, the ones with the highest quality goods, who produce the most.
The masters of their trades. Yeah.
With the most respected members of the community. Mm-hmm. They would pick from among themselves who was going to be essentially the mayor of this town for 2 years, 4 years, what have you.
Yeah.
The check and the balance comes in that it's actually Benito Mussolini has a quote I really like that says the functions of the citizen and the soldier are inseparable.
Yeah.
So to that end, it would essentially be required that all citizens be armed in some fashion.
Right.
Because you can't aid in the defense of the community if you're not. You're useless as a soldier if you do not have the arms to perform that function.
Right.
Well, and that's like in ancient Athens during the classical period, they had democracy and the people could vote, but you were not allowed to vote if you did not own a hoplite's panoply. If you didn't have armor and spear, you weren't allowed to vote.
Yeah.
And this kind of segues into an interesting, while we're on this little section of the discussion here, you're talking about doing a state within a state, I assume. This is a...
Yes.
Okay. So...
something that can function on its own without the interference or assistance of the state.
Of the state. Okay, so say you did something let's say you went to Arkansas and opened up a community. How would you do that? Keep your citizens armed, but also, I guess, put the state itself at ease, or the government, the United States government at ease is like, hey, we're not insurrectionists. We're just, we're a group of, homesteaders and preppers and that kind of thing.
I'd build it organically. You go out, you buy a big plot of land, 150, 200, 300 acres.
Right.
And the further west you go, the easier that is.
Right.
And you start off, you bring in like-minded family members. Mm-hmm. And you bring in like-minded friends. And you essentially lease the property.
Yeah, you do like the Bundy Ranch, except you don't let your cattle graze on federal property like a jackass.
Yeah. You keep everything in your own yard.
Mm-hmm.
And to keep that in balance, the land is communally owned. the land is part of a trust.
Right.
And everybody who lives there has an equal stake.
Well, that was something I was actually going to bring up earlier when you were talking about bringing this back
with the condition that you do something with your land.
Right. Yeah. Well, what I was discussing with a friend of mine a little while back, and one of the things that helps bring this into reality from the pie in the sky, like philosophical, how would you do it, to the realistic, this is how it's done.
Yeah.
Because I feel like there's a very big difference between a philosophical, how would you do it, and the actual, this is going to be a real thing.
Yeah.
When you're talking about leadership, the leadership I think will be a natural born thing before the land is ever purchased. Yeah. Simply because you're going to have one of two things. You're going to have a singular person who is done well for himself in life, whether that be through stocks or a business or what have you, and he has made a significant amount of money for himself. Yeah. And he can physically purchase 300, 400 acres himself and put this up and put this into play. Yeah. By all rights, and there's no question there, he's the chieftain. It's his property.
He would own the property.
It's his property. Yeah. He's the chieftain. It's his property, and if he wants people to come in and work this land, and he wants to create this community, that is fantastic, but he is the final say, because at the end of the day, he's the one responsible for the property and what happens on it.
If it goes to hell.
The problem is in the long term, you run into a situation where he dies, his son inherits that land. His son could be a total shithead.
That's true, but also you would have the issues of wills and when you get into a will, when you're devoting land, because a father is not stupid. He knows what's going to happen. And anyone who
has foresight.
Well, someone who'd be doing this would.
Maybe. You say that, maybe.
Well, I think the idea there would be you would have to put the will into trustees. Yeah. Trustees, somebody who was very, very in touch with what was going on in the community and how it would work. Because you're also looking at, by the time this gentleman dies, there's a new generation coming up anyway, and then these kids have to figure out, what do we want to do with this, or do we want to continue doing this, or what have you. Yeah. The other way that you could do this would be that you would get a group of people together that would put money into a pot to buy the land.
And that I think is the ideal way to do it.
Is it, though? Because what you run into there is you could have a conflict of interest.
Well, that's what I'm talking about, where I say if it's going to fall apart, it's going to fall apart before the land ever gets purchased, because you're going to sit there and figure out who's going to do what, and that's when the bickering will begin. If there's going to be bickering, you're going to have the people saying, oh, well, I want to be the chief, I want to be the chief, I want to be the goldmaster, I want to do this, I want to do that.
Yeah, yeah.
Ideally, if everything works out, it will work out before the land is purchased, because you're going to have a group of guys sitting at a table saying, this is what we want, this is what we want to do. Is everybody okay with this? Cool, let's go do it.
Yeah. And at that stage, if there is somebody in the group with a conflict, they want to do something the rest of the group just isn't okay with, at that stage, you can still get rid of them.
Yeah, or you can say, hey, this is not the direction we're going. You're not going to be happy here. You should probably go find somebody else that's on board with what your ideas are.
In the interest of sustainability and keeping it going as long as possible, I do think a certain degree of communal ownership and meritocracy is the best way to go.
Because having the land itself be owned by a trust and setting rules on the trust to, It's set up so that each of our firstborn son inherits our portion of the trust when we die.
Right, yeah.
We'll have the rules of the trust set up such that if your firstborn son just doesn't want to live that farmer's life and wants to leave, the rules the rules of the trust would stipulate something along the lines of, if he wants to sell off his portion, he must sell it to a member of the community.
Yeah.
I would just have it go. So the cool thing about a trust is a trust can be put together in people's names without anybody on the trust actually owning the property that is part of the trust.
Yeah.
The trust itself owns the property.
Yeah.
Which is why I like the idea of having a trust as a vehicle of communal ownership. Because then nobody in the community can take that from it without the permission of the rest of the community.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then if somebody was, say, not pulling their weight, being problematic, starting dissension and stuff, the board of trustees, the community council,
the guild masters is what that would end up being.
Could gather.
The guild masters are the most respected citizens.
Yeah,
could vote on, do we evict this guy?
And that's where you get into ideas like. So the idea there is, like, you get into ideas like the lawgiver and like the and you have the idea where these guys come down and they say, look, you're kind of causing waves. You're causing a lot of drama that we don't want. So shape up or ship out. Hit the bricks, pal. That kind of a thing.
And because the trust is technically private property, you can do that.
Yeah. All you have to do is give them a 30 days eviction notice.
Well, it depends on what state you're in. But
yeah, that's true.
Yeah, well, you would have looked at that ahead of time to figure out which one would have been the most friendly in terms of like building codes and
Right. But the way that the whole place is run is actually fairly simple, because you're not looking at thousands and thousands of people. You're looking at absolute maximum 300 people.
Yeah.
Usually it's not going to be that big.
Yeah.
You're looking at 50 to 100 people.
Because
not enough to cause any problems.
Well, and 300 people is the largest number of people that any one person can maintain meaningful relationships with.
Yeah, so ideally you would want to actually scale it back some to I'd say 150, so you still have enough room for outside contacts.
Yeah.
And what I think would happen, what I would like to see happen, what I think would be neat to watch happen, was you start a tribe, you start a community within this, and they are all working and living. You have kids, and because you're in a community and you're in a safe community, and everybody knows everybody, and everybody's watching each other's children, you have a lot of kids, because it's not all on you as the father or your wife as the mother to watch 5 kids, because that is exhausting.
Oh yeah,
nobody wants to do that, But when you have an entire group, of 50 to 100 people, adults.
You go back to that old adage of it
takes a village. Right.
Yeah, essentially, you're bringing back the family and that village mindset and a traditional family mindset.
Yeah. Right. And what will end up happening, I think, once the kids get older, because you're going to have an exponential population growth within one generation. Mm-hmm. So you're going to move from 100 people into, let's say, 300 or 400 people.
Right.
In the space of 70 years.
Yeah, they're going to need somewhere to live.
They're going to need somewhere to live too. So the idea there is that you continue growing and sprouting. So you start out with the one village, and then these kids get together and say, "Hey, this worked really well. We really like this. Let's go start another village." And then you have another village. Yeah. So they do the same thing again, and they create another village. And that's where the idea of a meeting of chieftains, or an all thing, or a meeting of communities comes together. You would have the leaders of each specific community coming in and meeting once a quarter, once a year, or whatever.
And you could actually use, for instance, you'd have to have some kind of system of taxation to fund the growth of a community.
Right. Well, you could have that if they're all leasing property. Then
the way I would handle it. So the way I would handle the accumulation of wealth of the town itself. The town buys the surplus goods of craftsmen, farmers, whatever, and sells them to outside communities after distributing some of that to the needy members of the community.
Yeah, you make weekly trips to the farmers market.
Yeah. That goes into a town treasury. Mm-hmm. Well, when it's time for maybe some of the younger generation to split off and form their own community, you give them a little bit to take with them.
You're like, hey, we've been doing this for 30, 40 years. We have several $1 million saved up. But after years and years and years of people, there being a treasury, here's your property.
Yeah, it's basically a company.
Right. You've established basically what in effect is a company.
And you can set up a structure, and you can set up a system in which there is, because the land and the treasury is essentially communal property. You send those people off with essentially their share of the treasury. Mm-hmm. And seed stock, whatever tools they own, to go off and do the whole thing again.
Yeah.
Those two communities then do the same thing. They build up money, and then when the next group needs to break off, you can divide that cost. Mm-hmm. And each new node fuels the next.
Right, and I think it would even be interesting to have a chief's chieftain. You have different chieftains or mayors or whatever nomenclature you want to use of each clan, and then you have one that I assume would be the original founder that's over. So we have 5 clans now, or 5 groups.
I would have that individual be elected by the town heads.
Right. Here's the thing. Most likely, unless the guy is just a complete jackass, usually what's going to happen is the guy that started the whole thing is going to be the one that remains in that position because
by the time there are enough branches for this to come into play, it's very likely he's died of old age.
Well, in that case, the chieftains would elect a chief of chieftains, and that's exactly what would happen because. But I think it would be neat because then you would have you could actually go further and have like the different tribes pay a percentage into that the big pot.
Yeah. And
the big pot would be used to purchase land and purchase for these. It's a monarchy in motion, but it's on a small enough scale where it's not.
Run this by, would it not be, because here's the thing, you're going to have, if you have multiple clans spread out among a fairly large spit of land, you're going to have different clans having different sets of ideals and different cultures after a while. That's going to happen. I'd say probably about as soon as that first split happens.
The idea is that split takes the group that is split off far enough outside the original.
We're not talking about next door.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is you're talking about if you're going into a monarchical system, as it were. Okay. The problem you're going to end up with is you might end up having two very different points of view coming together.
Like if we start in, say, Washington State, and our first splinter group moves to Arizona, they're going to have very different concerns, and then we get into the same quandary we have with America right now. How would one chief of chieftains rule these two very different communities?
Not only that, but it's also flying under the radar, making it... Because, let's assume the United States government is still up, still running, still very powerful, all right, when the split occurs. We do not want to be a threat to them, because as soon as we're a threat to their supremacy, they send FBI agents in to come check out what's going on.
We don't want down
That's why you follow the laws.
You understand that, but once you have when you have splits happening often, they see as it were, a monarch raising up. That's going to raise a few eyebrows, I would think.
Not if it's structured as a business, which is why because what I'm saying as a chieftain or as a chief of chiefs, what you actually would end up being on paper is a CEO. There is literally no difference between that and a CEO of the Ford Corporation.
So it would be Farm Corp at that point.
Exactly. It'd be Farm Corp. And what you would end up doing is, and when I say chief of chiefs, what I'm saying is I'm not saying that I come down to your, let's say this has already happened, 1, 2, 3, and there's 4 of us. We are each chieftains of our own tribe. Yeah. You're in New Mexico. I'm in Washington State. You're in California, and you're in Idaho.
He is Idaho.
Wah wah. So you get in.
You got plenty of potatoes. Idaho.
So we all meet together. We meet together at a table like we're doing right now. And we say, okay, so we've voted in a chief of chiefs, and for purposes of this argument, we'll say it's you, Coffee Pot. Okay. Your job is not to be pointing at a table and say you have to provide this, you have to provide this. Your job is to sit down and say, what do we need? What can we do to make everybody more prosperous? Is there something you need that we're making that we have access to?
So it's an accountability group.
Exactly. It's like, are you guys having problems with a certain individual? Is there somebody or something? Is there a problem that we need to solve?
He's basically internal affairs.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what he is.
His job there will be pretty much solely just to be the arbiter of trade deals between the communities.
Not only that, you would have him saying, "Hey, it'd be really cool if we all came in for a feast. Let's get all the tribes together to meet for a feast. We'll do this once a year. Yeah. I've already figured out where we're going to have it. We'll
I'll just fill the whole state."
Well, that's what I'm getting at. So that's the idea. The idea is not that he's this grand monarch standing there with a scimitar that's going to chop your head off. The idea is that he's the arbiter of the chief of chieftains is. It would only become an issue if it would only become an issue of we need to have a serious conversation, and I need to really take the reins if something...
When
Armageddon thoughts. Yeah. Like Armageddon, let's say that all of a sudden, out of fucking nowhere, the government collapses under its own weight. Now there is nobody else, and the barbarians are knocking at the door. Yeah. We have, let's say... Islamic terror has become a huge problem in the period that we've existed. Yeah. And now they are actively coming after us because we are not Muslim. Yeah. Now, the chief of chiefs is going to come in and say, get everybody fucking together, get the guns, get the, here's where we're meeting. Every able-bodied man meets here. We are closing this the fuck down. And that's when he becomes that's when he takes that hard chief role.
Yeah, but that's when he becomes monarch king.
Right, but then again, that most likely that would never have to happen because when you have a bigger, overreaching state such as the United States government, the odds of it collapsing are very, very small. Yeah, at least in our lifetime or the lifetime it would take to get this done.
Yeah, well, and not only that, but in a way, this is already done. And you look at prepper groups and different groups that come together for when Armageddon happens or when nuclear war happens.
Well, I think there's even better examples than that. Look at the Amish.
Yeah, Amish communities or
they are
everything
entirely self-sufficient.
Everything that we've just said is true of the Amish. Yeah, it's being done by the Amish. Yeah,
with the exception of self-defense because they're pacifist.
Actually, not necessarily.
I thought Mennonites are
pacifists.
Mennonites are fans.
Amish are not.
I did not know that.
The Amish actually quite like guns.
Well, I knew they enjoyed hunting, and because the Mennonites are also like that. But
I talked to a guy online not too long ago who actually lives near an Amish community.
Yeah,
and he has a couple of registered transferable machine guns that he likes to shoot on the weekends.
Yeah,
and he was out in his backyard just popping off some rounds, and he sees the hat come up over the. There's an Amish dude looking at. He's just like looking at just wide-eyed awe. He's like, "Can I shoot that?" Like, yeah. As it turns out, the Amish totally allowed to use modern technology. They just can't own it.
So you can let your Amish friend borrow your chainsaw, and he will love you for it.
But he's not allowed to own said chainsaw.
Yeah.
The Amish actually have a very interesting. This is a rabbit trail, but it's a fun one, so I'm going to jump down it.
Yeah.
The Amish actually have a fairly interesting idea of how technology is. It's not that they're against technology, and it's not that it's that it's moving too fast, and their idea is that we'll implement it at our speed.
Yeah, I get that.
We'll implement it in a very slow rate of speed where we know what's going to happen to people when we implement it.
Yeah.
It's an interesting idea.
So they're kind of using the rest of the world as a litmus test, as it were.
Pretty much, yeah.
And if you look at the progression of the kind of tools they use, they're using more modern tools now than they were back in the day. They're still hand tools for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
but they're using. They're keeping up with the latest trends in hand tools.
Like, some of them have, like, treadle-powered power hammers.
Yeah. But you have, so that's interesting. But
this is already being done is kind of what we're getting at.
And getting back on topic, the structure is fun to talk about, and I have thought this to death, I think, for the most part. Like, I enjoy the idea of the structure, and we've talked about guilds, and I know I've talked to all of you at one point or another about guilds.
And I think as far as this goes, we all have fairly similar ideas on how things should be.
Because it's generally it's generally easy to do, especially with a small group of people.
Well, in a small group of people, communism can work.
Yeah.
Any government system within a group of less than 300 people can do a fairly good job.
Yeah, because when you have a group that's small, if somebody has a complaint, it's not one of my citizens has a problem. It's, John's pissed. What's going on, man?
Yeah, and you know if John actually
I know if John's a jackass and complains all the time, or if John
just ignore John.
Or John never complains.
Right.
What? Why? Holy shit! John's angry. John's never angry. You know. So you have that, but what I find more fun and what I haven't talked about as much, and I think this was more exciting. This was when I kind of got excited when you brought this topic up. I want to talk about the actual physical things that you would need to start the group. Like, what kind of jobs would you like? Because I have this in my head, and I think it'd be really cool.
Well, first things first, you need
farmers.
Yeah, you need okay. Well, let's before we get into this, let's nail it down to what do you need? You need shelter. You need food.
Right.
You need water.
Yep.
Now, later on, you don't need this to start with, but it is nice to have electricity and running water.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So first thing first, you're going to need farmers.
Not going to lie, I'd actually like to avoid electricity and running water, thank you.
Okay, all right. All right, so first off, you're going to need farmers. You're going to need some kind of construction corps, which, that you can have everybody do that.
Well, and you can have one person can build like a log house or something.
Right. Or have everyone build their own house. When it comes to having access to water, when it comes to actually having... What?
Wells.
Yeah, have a well drilled.
They do cost like, what was it? What did they say, like 20 grand?
It is 20,000. No, it depends on where you are.
Yeah. I looked into drilling.
If you're up in the Canadian Shield, it costs about $20,000 to drill a well.
I looked at drilling a well where we live at. Actually, fairly recently, when I was looking at possibly buying land,
building a tiny house.
Yeah, that fell through. But I figured out it costs about $3,000 to build to dig a well, which is a lot, but it's not insurmountable.
Yeah,
It's not
that's because like here our water table is fairly high. Considering because we're in a rainforest.
Yeah, water gushes from every rock where we live. What are you talking about?
Yeah. So, but around here it would be very easy to dig a well.
Yeah. But so you need that, and once you have your basics covered, you can kind of branch out. What then? You're going to need a source of income so you can continue to pay taxes on this land.
Correct.
So you're going to need, what do you want to do? What is your economy going to be based on? Will it be based on handcrafts? Will it be based on where you have a centralized manufacturing plant? Will it be based on making a surplus of agricultural goods and then selling those?
Well, it's...
I think, and sorry to cut you off there, but the idea I had, what do we have a shit ton of around here? We got a lot of clay.
Wood? Oh, clay, yeah,
clay. A lot of clay.
We do have a lot of wood. We do have a lot of wood.
We've got a lot of actually really good farmland up here. A lot of people don't realize it.
Oh yeah.
Once you rake all the rocks out.
Yeah. No, and it's not really a natural resource, but there's a scrapyard every 5 miles around here.
Right.
So you want to make money for the town? We need blacksmiths because we're gonna need tool repair.
We're blacksmiths.
That's a source of income. We got tons of clay, kilns. Potting wheels, not hard to make.
Yeah.
Farmers markets. Literally every zip code has a farmers market around here.
So you can sell excess vegetables and stuff. And not only that, it would be cool. You could actually create your own farm. People would come to a village, especially if it was like a traditional style. Let's say when you were planning this village out, you decided like, I'll use my aesthetic because I like the aesthetic I like. I like the Norwegian Viking aesthetic. I think that looks super fucking cool.
And just everybody dressed like that.
Right. Well, I like the Germanic and I like that kind of aesthetic. So you have...
Well, and everyone build their house like that.
Yeah, everybody build their house like this. So you walk in and it's a cobblestone square with a fountain or a well in the middle of it. And there's lots of like old houses and stuff. People dress up in very traditional clothing on the weekends and they sell their wares at this market.
Yeah.
You tell me people will not show up to see this and take pictures and just have this cool little village. They're like, oh man, look at this. It looks like these...
Take pictures with Olaf.
Right, well, yeah, exactly. So that's one way you could absolutely do it. Actually, my girlfriend actually mentioned that she brought this up. She was talking about... because she has aspirations to become a midwife and a doula.
Yeah.
And she was talking about birthing centers. Tell me people would not pay pretty well to have birthing centers in a traditional environment where they're like, hey, I don't want to go to a hospital, I want to come here and have
what you'd run into there is probably
then you have the FDA, you've got medical boards.
Yeah, that's something that would have to be addressed.
But
I'm not saying I'm not trying to
very expensive.
I'm not trying to crap on your dreams. That can be done. But
right. The point I'm getting at is not that
right into your backyard.
The point I'm getting at is not that it would be easy. The point is it's possible.
Yeah.
And this isn't something you would necessarily have to do immediately beginning day one. This is something that could happen 15 years down the road. You're like, hey, this would be a neat idea. This would bring in money.
Yeah.
Ta-da!
Yeah. Another thing is like if you're doing agricultural, I don't think produce is regulated, but things such as eggs. Milk you're not allowed to sell anywhere. I don't think you can actually go to jail for that, which is messed up. But anyway,
fruits and vegetables you can sell anywhere.
And truth be told, I don't like it, but property tax is pretty reasonable, usually speaking. I dislike it.
I hate that it's a thing,
right?
But it's not.
But it's not absurd.
Well, right now, you can go out, buy a piece of property, live off the grid, make just enough produce to sell to pay your property taxes, and you can be just fine. So long as you pay your taxes, you're good.
Yeah.
I mean, you're golden.
Because I think property tax on 100 acres is like what, $1,000 a year or something.
Yeah, it's not bad.
Terrible.
No, it's not bad.
It's nothing.
Yeah.
You could literally have 2 or 3 people working at McDonald's for like a few weeks and get the property tax.
Yeah. Shoot, I on one of the old Mother Earth News magazines. I had a whole bunch from like the 1970s, and I think one of them was actually a guy only worked like 4 months out of the year to pay for his rent and his property tax, and that was it. Or his rent actually when he didn't have taxes.
Yeah. So there you go, and so it's not. That is actually not an insurmountable obstacle. Yeah. It's just a pain.
Yeah.
But it can be done fairly easily.
It's not even really a pain. It's just like a minor aggravation.
Yeah,
it's a mosquito bite.
Yeah, it's an inconvenience. But it's not a insurmountable obstacle. And after that, the odds are just by living and just by producing, having craftsmen, having blacksmiths and carpenters
people
and
will come
woodworkers.
from miles just to look.
Not only will they come from miles, one of the biggest things now is look at Amish-made furniture.
Oh, yeah.
People will pay top dollar for Amish furniture because they want furniture that's made by the Amish.
Yeah, it's handmade.
And it's funny because it's all made in factories anyway.
Yeah.
They just have Amish working in the factories.
Yeah, but the thing is, if you had people, you would have people come in for good handmade stuff. You always do. Like, there's never not going to be a desire for handmade
crafts and artists and stuff. The problem you run into is that I don't know if this would be an issue within a community, but would you run into the same problem that you have with artisans today? Where, like, a case in point, blacksmiths. There are these dummies that will walk up like, why would I pay that much for a handmade, lawn chair when I can go to Lowe's and buy one?
Oh, they can go to Lowe's.
Yeah, I mean, that's the problem is you end up with the starving artist mentality.
Well, see, the thing is we don't have to get rich off of this. If I sell one table a month, that's our property tax.
Yeah.
And that's not even, doesn't even account for the one table a month you're making.
Yeah, and as long as everybody's eating because the farmers are growing,
yeah,
everybody's eating, everybody has a home, everybody has a hearth, everybody has a community.
Their basic needs are taken care of.
Basic needs are taken care of. They're doing something they enjoy doing because ideally nobody's going to be strong-armed into doing this. They're here because they want to be. This is a certain type of people that would be.
And that segues into another interesting part of this is that how would you bring in new individuals into your clan or into your club here?
Well,
string vetting.
Well, obviously, but how would you handle that process?
See,
because you're going to have. I'll let you talk just a minute further. You're going to have people that come in. And this cause problems because unfortunately, we always there's always that one person that likes to gossip, and then you get one person complaining, and then the whole thing collapses like a house of cards. How would you prevent that from happening?
Well, as far as how to bring people in, you live in a shack in the woods, so I don't blame you for not knowing. But we have this wondrous invention called the internet.
No, I realize that. Obviously, background checks, but background checks are not necessarily...
Well, no, I mean, like, to bring people in, it's just, hey, we're looking for tenants who wants to live in a...
I think what he's talking about is not bringing people...
But
not...
How do we prevent people once they're already in, like... How do we make sure that they're the right kind of people?
Yeah, or how do you catch them before they come in? Because let's be honest... Unfortunately, you're going to attract the neo-Nazis and the mindless, because that's the kind of things that they like to look at this from an overthrow to government mentality.
Yeah, the inner woods for people.
I'd make them rent for 2 years before they could own property.
Yeah, and that's a pretty simple fix. It's a very severe vetting process.
You have to live here for a certain amount of time
for 2 years,
before your name is added to the trust.
Take acclimation courses.
What I would do is I would have. So you want to become a member of this group, this community. You submit an application. On that application, you must give us your Facebook, your Instagram, all your social media accounts. Mm-hmm. Not your passwords, but I want to see what you're doing. I want to see what you share and what you like.
Well, I'd require a criminal history.
Well, I'm getting there. Yeah. So on that one, you have all this other stuff. You have your social security and all this other stuff. So we do background checks because the criminal history is the easiest one to go for. You do that for jobs and renters history.
Yeah,
that's easy. So you run that. Okay, cool. The background check came clean. Okay, well let's see what they like. You get on their their Facebook and you scroll back and you scroll back for as long as you want to.
I see a whole bunch of thoughts. This person is not right.
In his application, upstanding member of my church on the Facebook, the prostitute and a bottle of wine or something.
Yeah. So that's the stuff you have to look at. Also you can also double check things when things don't sound right.
Yeah.
Like when there's very clearly like he's saying something but he's doing other things from what he's saying, like
or come at it with a kind of like law enforcement interviews people. They'll ask them the same question in 5 or 6 different ways,
right?
Because they want to know,
and at different times and in different settings.
Yep.
And another thing you can do, have a person who's affiliated with the group that isn't really part of it, who's a psychiatrist, a counselor, something like that. You're like, hey, that's our HR person, or whatever title. Mm-hmm. They want to interview you. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's part of our process, And after the interview, we'll get back to you.
Right. Yeah, and after that, so that will get rid of the overtly batshit insane people.
Yeah. Right.
So now you have John and Jill.
Okay.
John and Jill are a newlywed couple. They've just gotten married a few months ago, and they're really big into this. They're really big into the outfit, the prepper and all this other stuff. So, okay, we run the background check on John and Jill. Checks out fine. We check out their Facebook pages and the profiles. It's pretty standard stuff. They like stuff about woodworking, and they like stuff about metalworking, and pretty standard fare for that kind of people.
The shrink says they're not completely nuts.
Well, you sit them down, they talk to a psychologist or something. They sit there and talk to them, and they say, okay, yeah, they seem pretty well adjusted. They're fine. Okay, cool. John and Jill slide into the community, and they're there for, let's say a few weeks. Within that time, once they start getting comfortable, it usually only takes a person around 6 to 9 months to get comfortable.
Yeah.
After that period of time, that's when problems are going to start popping up. And as early as 3 for the bad ones and as late as 6 to 9.
Yeah.
That's when you're going to start seeing who these people actually are.
Yeah.
So let's say John has a bit of a drinking problem that didn't really show up at all, but now he's out at 3 a.m. hooting and hollering and breaking windows, or they get into a gigantic fight every other night.
Yeah.
And they're throwing bottles and stuff against the wall.
Yeah.
Or, Jill likes to talk a lot, and so she's spreading everybody's rumors, everybody's gossip everywhere, and there's very clearly a very distaste of her as a person.
Yeah.
That's when you say, okay. Because ideally, I would not tell them that they're on a probation. I would not tell them that they're on a probation.
I think you have to.
Yeah.
Well, if you're because it's you're dealing with a company or a corporation.
If you treat it as a business, you then actually have to inform them of things like that. Which is actually why I would suggest a 1 to 2 year rental period before they can own land and do things like that.
Well, I mean, and using as a rental period, you wouldn't have to tell them because as a rental period, I can evict you or vote you off the island whenever.
Yeah.
For any reason.
So what I would do,
because I am the owner.
I'd have a 1 or 2 year rental period. There we go. Where, for instance, they're not allowed to own. They don't own the land, so they can't farm it or anything.
Right.
So they're dependent upon interacting with the community for food and whatnot.
Okay.
That forces them into a situation where if they are going to cause problems, that's when they're going to do it.
Yeah.
And it does it in a way where you're not putting any external pressure on them. They've moved into a new town. They have to buy groceries.
Yeah. And there's also a fairly easy way to go about this, because when I say kicking people off or voting them off the island, you don't necessarily. It's not what you do; it's how you do it. It may not necessarily have to be something to the effect of get the hell out.
You just go to them and say, "Hey, this is not the place for you."
Right. You walk up to them. You say, "Hey, look. There's been issues. These are clearly like the people you're here with that y'all are clashing. This is very obviously this is just not working out for you.
Yeah.
You can stay here for, a few more months until you find another place. We're not going to boot you out of your ass unless there's like egregious trust violations.
Unless there's something horrible unless there's something real bad going on, you don't even have to go that far.
Yeah.
Because in this scenario, we're talking about essentially a functional town. So we've got religious organizations in town. We've got things like that. But like, hey, we've heard you guys have some issues. We're a pretty close-knit community here. We're worried about you guys.
Mm-hmm.
We're here. We've got people here you can talk to and work this stuff out, because they might just be going through a particularly rough patch in their relationship. They did just move into an entirely new place with an entirely new style of life.
Yeah.
So I would have it first time, maybe second time. Hey, you might want to go.
What can we do to help?
Yeah. Try to help them out, because they might just be going through a rough patch. If it persists after that, it's like, hey, you scare the other people here.
Like,
this become a problem.
You need to straighten up and fly right.
My child just saw you run out in a bathrobe screaming and throwing a bottle at your husband. That's not okay.
Yeah. After that, then you can go into, hey, maybe you don't belong here.
Yeah.
You take it slow and in steps.
Mm-hmm.
That way, if they are just having some temporary issues, they can work it out before they make the full transition into the structure.
Yeah.
But I fully agree. If it gets to a point where they're actually disrupting the function of the community, they need to go.
Right. Well, and any time you have interpersonal relationships, you're going to have
things are going to happen.
Things are going to happen.
Right,
somebody's going to get pissed off and say, "You stole my goat," or
And that's where a situation like the Gothi or the priest or the preacher or the chieftain, that's where they would step in. They'd be like, "All right, mediation."
Yeah. Most religions, I know, like a case in point, in Christianity, if you have beef with another Christian, you go to the preacher or the priest or whatever, and try to work it out within the church.
A priest and a Gothi actually behave they serve very similar functions.
Yeah. Well, most religious leaders do.
Yeah.
Most what you would consider
clergy.
Yeah. Perhaps more like some of the other maybe I don't know how the Hindus conduct their services, and I don't know how these other
they're
types.
Weird. Hinduism is very strange,
right? But they don't. Yeah. They also, to my knowledge, don't have a real structured clergy, such as
they do, but they're for major holidays. They're not a day-to-day thing,
right? And the clergy that deals with day-to-day, that most of them have a
function like that. Like, hey, you need to stop. You stole from brother so and so over here. Give him back his money.
Right.
And then if they don't, they end up getting excommunicated or whatever. Mm-hmm.
So, in the town for transactions amongst ourselves, do we use U.S. currency or do we make a local currency?
I actually had the idea of buying silver and gold bullion.
I actually had a very similar idea.
I wouldn't go with gold because gold is outrageously priced. I think silver probably in various
just
ounces.
using that as a or using gold for extremely expensive purchases.
Having a communal the town treasury, use that to purchase gold that bolsters the town's wealth.
Right, and it's interesting because a lot of your high fantasy settings, in your D&D and stuff, that system actually works. Mm-hmm. 10 copper to a silver, 10 silver to a gold.
Yeah,
that actually works. That works fairly well because you're looking at it's very simple and some metal base, and also you're looking at stuff
depending on, of course, the size and weight of the coins.
Right, but what you're looking at how much is it for a house, and also you're creating an artificial economy. Well, it wouldn't be artificial; it would be a micro economy. So a house isn't going to be $133,000 in your village. It's going to be 10 or 15 gold because a cabbage only costs half a copper.
Yeah.
And realistically, it doesn't even have to be an entirely currency-based economy.
No, most of it will be bartering. Currency will only be for, I would like to buy this goat, and I would like to sell it to you, and I want a receipt for the goat.
Yeah.
That kind of a thing. Yeah. Most of the time, especially with groups of 50, 100 to 150, it's going to be bartering. It's going to be
I'm thinking mostly a system in which, hey, I want to build an addition onto my cabin.
Yeah. Throw this out there.
What do you if I want to build an addition onto my cabin, you guys all have the expertise, all have the tools or the skills necessary to help me do that.
Right.
I'd be like, hey, I've still got canned goods left over from winter, and I've got I made these pots or something. Would you guys be willing to trade that labor for these goods?
Yeah.
Things like that.
Well, we should also have a currency for things that are just going to be too expensive to barter for. You just bought a brand new tractor, but you also bought a brand new tractor 2 years ago. It's still in great shape. It's essentially a brand new tractor. Yeah. You just needed to upgrade. I want to buy your old tractor. That's going to be a couple $1,000s, and I don't know if I can work that off. But I do have a gold bar.
And here's the thing, with stuff like that,
gold right now is what, $100 an ounce?
No, it's $1,300.
Yeah,
wow.
It's pretty expensive.
So there you go, an ounce of gold. So you have a coin.
Well, and another thing is in a small localized economy like this, where we're doing as much as possible internally, things don't even necessarily have to have set values. Mm-hmm. You want the tractor. A fair price is whatever both parties agree to.
Yeah. Yes. However, I'm assuming you didn't buy the tractor in our town because we don't have a factory.
Yeah. But if I've already got a tractor, there's no reason for me to sell you the tractor for $2,000-$3,000. Hey, help me build this boat I'm working on.
And if you wanted to do it with the currency, say, okay, gold is $1,300 an ounce. I bought this tractor brand new for $5,000 US. Give me two gold coins for it.
Yeah. Throw this out there, because this is going to come out even with a internalized economy. Income tax. Everybody has to pay it. That's something that
you only have to pay it if you actually have income.
Right. So the thing is, with an internalized economy, it's not income.
Okay.
Income tax would come in with because it's a little bit different, especially it depends on how you structure it.
Okay.
If you structure the town as a farm, all you're paying on is stuff you sell at the farmer's market. The only taxes you're paying is on money coming in U.S. currency. Anything that happens on internally is your business.
So we sell the excess of produce that we got. We bring in United States currency. We transfer some of that in bullion. Yeah. And then keep some of that in the bank. For rainy day.
Well, what would end up happening is you would have let's say we have all of our farmers and all of our craftsmen, everybody's going out to market. We go to the farmer's market. We sell. We sell our tables, our blacksmith goods, our vegetables, everything, whatever we make. Yeah. We bring in, let's say on a really good week, we've had a really great weekend. We were there for Saturday, Sunday, or Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We had a great weekend. We brought in $30,000. Okay. Everybody all together brought in $30,000. Okay. The idea there is that, okay, we have $30,000. Yeah. Tax on that is X. So you would have to have a treasurer that would come in. And what would end up happening is the treasurer would come in and say, hey, we have to pay taxes. This percentage of it is going to, I think income is 15%. It might be more or less depending on how, I haven't looked into it this far. If it becomes a reality where this is something I actually look at doing, I will definitely come back with a lot more information.
I think taxes are like 15%.
Right, but that's if you have a W-2. I don't know how it works if you have a farm. Yeah. But the idea is, so you're bringing this stuff in, you put the money away. Your treasurer puts the money away for the tax money. Yeah. The rest of it is you could run it a couple different ways. You could have the individual pay the village and say, okay, you made $5,000 off selling. You sold 14 tables, 75 heads of lettuce, and net you made $1,400. Well, the state requires this much, so pull your tax money out of that. Now you have this much. You have to pay the community a portion of it, and I'm not talking about a gigantic portion. I'm thinking maybe 10%. Yeah. Something very reasonable.
Kind of like a tithe or something.
Yeah, like a tithe or something like that. Yeah. You say, okay, now you have this much money left. You can either switch this into bullion and use it for internal currency, or you can put it in your own private bank account, and that's your business. Yeah. It's up to you.
How about this?
I would require that a certain amount of it stay internal.
How about this? The individual members of the community don't have income at all. All of the products sold at market are sold by the town itself.
Yeah, they're property of the corporate entity that is the town.
Mm-hmm. And so the town has income and pays income tax.
Oh, so you would be paying your farmers and stuff in bullion.
I'd be paying them in bullion or whatever you need. Yeah. Tell us. We will look at your contribution to the town, and out of that, we will buy you whatever you need.
That may or may not be legal. I'm not sure because it's you're dealing at that point. If you're running it as a corporation, you're dealing with employees.
Well, we're not running as a corporation. We're running as a trust, though. The trust is a legal individual.
Yeah, a trust that owns a farm.
Okay, all right.
And that's the trick. That's what I was talking about with the legal. Like, there's a few different ways to run it. You can run it as a corporation. You can run it as an agricultural endeavor. You can run it as a trust. Depending on how you do it is going to depend on how this has to happen.
Yeah, right.
But you can iron out and you can really hammer down what's the best way to do it when it actually becomes a real thing.
Yeah. Right. I like the idea of a trust, for instance, because if you look at other trusts, like an NFA trust, for instance, for buying NFA-regulated firearms, you can have as many people as you want on that trust who all have access to that firearm. However, you only buy one tax stamp. Not everybody needs a tax stamp because the trust has one.
Okay.
And that's kind of why I like the idea of a trust, because when you're looking at a trust, it is the trust itself that is a legal individual. Mm-hmm. A trust doesn't have employees, so a trust doesn't have to pay anyone. Mm-hmm. So those people aren't getting income from the trust, so they're not having to pay income tax on a salary or anything.
Right. Yeah.
The trust is paying income. It would pay any taxes for any property of the trust that it sells.
Right. All right. Next question up. Let's say we get the inevitable guy who is taking advantage of the system. He's able-bodied. He's able to work. There is nothing to stop him from working. And let's say we're piling up all the resources in a centralized warehouse and then giving it out according to what people have contributed. How do you handle that guy?
He doesn't get anything. You don't work, you don't eat.
Okay. That sounds great, but what about when he starts making a kerfuffle about it? How do you deal with him? Should you deal with him legally? How do you... Essentially, let's say he's contributed for a while, and he's done well, and he owns part of this, or he's on the trust. But okay, he's causing problems. We got to get rid of him.
The
How do you
board
do
of
that?
trustees comes together and votes. All the people.
This goes back to the issue before
Okay.
we had, where we're like, "Hey, man, this is a problem. We have to talk about."
Right,
this.
obviously you try to, but you're going to have that inevitable freeloader.
Well, and I would have it be a part of the terms of being a member of the trust.
Also, a
right?
significant group of people. Like, also, you're going to be. When I say going to the farmers market, when I say making stuff to sell, you're selling excess. You're not selling what you need to eat.
No,
Yeah.
You are growing your own food, and you're slaughtering your own hogs. You're milking your own cows. Like, you're making the food that you need to stay alive, or somebody you know is, and you're working for them directly with some other setup plan. But the plan is, if the guy is going to not eat, basically. He's going to be hungry and he's starving, and it's not going to take very many times of can I borrow before this becomes a big
So
issue.
it essentially becomes because when you had, case in point, the early colonies in the Americas, you had, I believe it was Jamestown that actually started out with a Marxist style, we throw it all in a warehouse and we give it out according to what people need.
Right.
That didn't work out. The colony almost failed because of that. Mm-hmm. So they switched over to, okay, everyone's responsible for making their own food. You don't make enough? Sorry, buddy. You get to starve. You know.
The way I would handle it is essentially, I would have it be part of the terms of the trust. Mm-hmm. You contribute. Mm-hmm. If you do not, if you are able to contribute and you do not, you are removed from the trust.
Right.
If you don't necessarily contribute products, then you must at least contribute labor towards those products.
Right. And I would have it be set up that basically surplus is allocated to individuals and families. I would have it be allocated to families primarily. Mm-hmm. Families first, individuals second.
Yeah.
Because I view the family as the fundamental basis of
your family
society.
is your foundation. You know.
So I would have it be allocated to families and individuals based on need and contribution. Mm-hmm. If you are able to contribute but you do not, and you have a need, you don't get anything. Because you are able to contribute, but are choosing not to.
Mm-hmm. Right, and obviously you take care of.
And you would have to agree to that to be part of the trust.
Yeah. Well, and a great thing about the trust is even if somebody is on the trust, and even if somebody is on the trust and even hasn't broken any of the rules of the trust, they just for some reason or another are no longer liked or respected by the community. Trusts are self-regulating. A trust, as long as they vote on it and come to a majority agreement, can kick anybody out of the trust that they want for any or no reason.
So it essentially checks and balances itself. At that point.
If anybody decides they want to be a leech on the community, they're not in the community anymore.
I also don't think this will be as big of an issue as...
obviously, but you're always going to have that.
It is possible it could come up, and so it's a good thing to think about.
Yeah.
But
it could
we shouldn't necessarily plan around.
I don't think lazy people typically get into homesteading.
Right.
No, obviously, but let's say second generation in.
I think a far more likely scenario was you would have somebody that was very filthy.
Yeah, or something.
That was they lived in squalor and filth because they didn't think that they needed to clean up their front yard, and it was becoming an
issue.
And that's another reason why I like the idea of a trust. With a trust, that property isn't yours. It's communal property.
Exactly.
You have a duty to keep it clean.
Yeah.
You don't have the legal right to trash that property because it isn't yours.
Yeah.
Not yours in a traditional sense. Like, you don't rule that property. It is communal property that you can do with as you see fit, provided it stays within the regulations set forward by the founding document of the trust.
Mm-hmm.
So in that regard, if your property starts falling into squalor, you're violating the terms of the trust. You're out.
Yeah. So I think that would, and even that I don't think would necessarily be a huge...
No. Yeah. Well, once again, most people that are motivated and are going to get into homesteading, there's going to be you're going to have a little bit of clutter around, but it's not going to be.
But I'd make waste disposal pretty easy.
Yeah.
I'd have a community compost.
Well, not only that, like if you're getting into this, you're not using plastics. You're using bone and wood and stuff that's very biodegradable,
metal and glass and whatnot.
Yeah, exactly. Stuff that's very clearly
glass blowing. That's something else we do bring in money.
I thought it'd be cool to have a miller too. That would be. I'd love to have a river on the property, like have a river that runs a mill.
I wouldn't do this any place where there wasn't a river.
Big thing about the river, though. I know. Granted, Trump did actually reverse this, but there was a law in the books that basically said that any water on your property is owned by the government. So that would be if that ever came up again.
You can purchase water rights. That's the thing you can get.
You can, but once again, it's kind of it's yet another avenue.
It does put the government in your backyard again, but
now
you need access to water.
Yeah, Trump did reverse this. But let's say Hillary Clinton gets it next year, God forbid,
There are also, alternatives to that. Like if you want to run a sawmill or a grist mill for grain,
you go to a place with high wind content.
Well, I mean, a grist mill you can build windmills. You can have it run by goats or mules.
Yeah, like there's multiple.
Yeah, a river is ideal though because it doesn't use any calories and you don't have to allocate animals to it.
Yeah, it doesn't stop.
You don't have to feed it.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that would be neat.
Yeah. There's actually I think in Holland with the big windmills they have. Yeah. They actually inside of those things they actually have. I think a guy on YouTube, Wrangler Star, had visited Holland and they have real big sawmills, but it's actually pretty cool. They move back and forth like a handsaw would, but it takes a long time to get through a board, but it's always running. Mm-hmm. So it's pretty cool looking.
Yeah. And that would be easy to getting into this semantics of it. Would be easy to put pressure on that board. Mm-hmm. Have a giant scrap. That's
it's a big conveyor belt. Yeah, is what it is.
It's literally set it and forget it. So
that's the really cool thing about this whole idea is nothing worth thinking about hasn't already been done.
Yeah. So
it's already been planned and built and designed for us.
We just have to put it together.
Yeah, it's like an IKEA town.
Actually, I have designed. I designed some stuff for that thing we did.
Yeah, let's not talk about that.
Okay.
But he's designed pipe machines and whatnot.
Yeah, nice. I designed a river powered essentially roller press for pressing pipe and wire out of bar stock.
Yeah. Oh mercy, we're about out of time now, though. Aren't we? Yeah.
How about we do a sequel to this next week?
I agree with that. I think it'd be neat because I think we got
a lot more to talk about.
I think we could jump more into the actual physical day-to-day running. But we mostly talked about the
three-parter, logistics, day-to-day, and then say cultural stuff.
Possibly, yeah, that would be neat. Yeah, that'd be cool.
That'd be good.
All right, guys. Well, this has been RightCast Radio. And I am your host. They call me the Jackrabbit. With me is the founder of rightchan.org,
Chatus,
and our two panelists,
Coffee Pot
and Cobra.
Real quick notice. So if you've been to our website recently, you'll notice that it's down. We are aware of this, and we're working on it. Currently, right now, the website's trying to download as a file. It's probably something with a PHP. But we're figuring this out. We're slowly trying to figure out what's going on with it, and we hope to have it up by next week. Other than that, you folks have a wonderful day, and buy local.
Buy local.